All right, so this week in Pax Day, the developers go into the official Discord and they talked about two in development feedback topics. One relating to failed crafting and returns on materials that you get when that happens. And then the other one has to do with dueling and the dueling system that they are working on right now in development. So we're going to go ahead and talk about all of that and a little bit more, but hello and welcome back, all of you amazingly professional consumers of Pax Day and Pax Day related content out there. I'm Altari, the Professional Gamer, and this is another episode of the Pax Friday Review, the show where we talk about all the fun, interesting, new, and exciting information that has come out for Pax Day over the last week. Like I said, this week we didn't get any real official news, but we did get the devs interacting with the player base a lot, having not one, but two in development feedback threads that were opened over the last 7 days, where Peter, most specifically, was going in to interact with all of us, the players in the official Discord, and they talked about failed crafting, salvage system, as well as, and almost, I would say, the more exciting of these being 1v1 dueling and how that is going to look in Pax Day in the near future. These are all features that are going to be coming to the Arcadia test server probably in the next month, if I had to guess, and based on what they've been saying. So these are real changes that are coming to the game and are coming to the game fast. Very exciting, and I am excited to break out into these two various posts with all of you today. But before we do that, I just wanted to say a special shout out to all of the channel members who are out there supporting our channel financially. Without you, we couldn't do all the fun, cool stuff that we do on this channel. So really thank you for that. And then for anyone else who's watching this video, the best way that you can help is by hitting that like button, subscribing so you get notified whenever we come out with new Pax Day or Pax Day related content, and share this video with any of your friends who are looking to stay up to date with all things Pax Day. I really like how the developers are just going into the Discord and interacting with the player base. I think that's really important. And I also really like this kind of more open feel that we are getting from Mainframe over the last couple of weeks. So without further ado, we're going to head over to Pax Day's official Discord to go and check out on these two posts. I will see you all over there. All right, so here we are on the first post. This came out actually just about a week ago, and this was the in development feedback post for failed crafting and return system. And for this, the general premise is improving on failed crafting. So salvage system, when things go wrong in game, how do you get rewarded for that is basically the way that I was looking at this when I was reading through it earlier. So crafting inherently, they believe, should involve risk, but when a craft fails, the outcome should feel fair relative to what was invested. So with that being said, they are improving the failed crafting system return so recovery can scale with the weight of the ingredients that were used rather than just relying on a flat, uniformed randomness. So this change focuses purely on failed craft outcomes, and then broader recycling systems will be discussed separately. So the core concept here is when a craft fails, the system evaluates the overall investment in the recipe and then determines how much of it should be recoverable. We apply a salvage target, for example, 50% is what they said. So on a failure, the target defines the minimum portion of ingredient values returned to the crafter when it fails. Ingredients from the original recipe are returned until that target is met or exceeded, and then returned items are selected randomly, but they are weighted. So the idea here is when you fail right now, it's just kind of a random assortment of things that you get back, but based on the amount that you fail by, you should be getting proportionately different materials back and different weights of materials back as well. So when you fail, you're not just going to fail horribly unless you actually failed horribly. And when you don't fail horribly, you will actually recover at least some, if not a lot of the materials that you actually spent in order to do this craft. So with that, this affects both the chance of recovering the ingredients as well as the calculation of what is returned. And what they mean by that is they're talking about that not all ingredients are inherently equal, and each ingredient in the game is gaining a new value that represents the scarcity of that resource and the effort needed to produce this ingredient. So this is basically a way for them to track and determine the weights of things so that when you're getting something back, like for example, if you get a blue sigil, a majestic sigil, that's pretty difficult to go and attain. If you get that back, then the proportionality of what that is versus a couple of iron ingots is going to be completely different. So with that, at the start of the recovery, as well as after each item is salvaged, probabilities are recalculated based on what remains. This means rare or expensive components are much more likely to be recovered. Basic materials still contribute, but they're less likely to define the outcome comparatively. And if a valuable item pushes you past the recovery target, that's fine. Overflow is allowed. This is still meaning that there's randomness, but it's going to reflect the real investment. So why might you recover almost everything? So again, the logic behind this is a recipe represents a total investment of 100 points of ingredient value. Your salvage target is 50%. As a result, 50% of 100 points means recovering a target of 50. If the rolls pick items for salvage initially, rolls lower probability items, and before the last roll, you'll have salvaged items totaling 49 points, and the most valuable remaining component is selected next. At that time, it will be returned, even if it pushes the total far beyond 50. In that case, you could recover nearly everything. This is rare, but it is possible. So that is basically what they're talking about there. And then they break into progression and specialization. So when the new salvage system goes live, each recipe will have its own salvage target, and the same target will be used for all players, regardless of crafting skill and crafter used. However, they will be expanding on this system to be contextual and tie into progression. So there's going to be multiple factors like the specialization system, but multiple factors in crafting are planned to affect the salvage, specifically recipe difficulty, advanced crafting facilities, settlement bonuses, which I believe are what's being referred to with the comfort system that they alluded to a while ago. But then also miracles. So those are what you use grace for. Craftsman gear and clothing. This was a great one to hear come back. So way back when we had blacksmithing aprons and other things, looks like that's going to be coming back, which is very exciting. So really cool there. And then other crafting related effects. So the blanket statement, that means they don't have to share too much about what they have planned. Some bonuses may directly increase the salvage target thresholds. Others may improve related crafting performance. And they said more details will follow. This also has to do with early game protection. So low-level recipes will have a very high salvage target. New players that are experimenting with crafting should not be heavily punished for early failures. As players move to higher tiers, the baseline salvage becomes less forgiving. However, as mentioned, the progression, infrastructure, gear, and miracles will allow for experienced players to improve their recovery chances significantly when the feature goes out. The benefit of most valuable components having the highest chance of being salvaged will be immediately available with all recipes. So, in earnest, what they're saying here is crafting should carry tension, but it should feel fair, and you should have the ability to manage these risks, i.e. by the settlement bonuses or by having crafting related gear using miracles. Now, the players gave a bunch of feedback over the week, and then they posted a summary of that. So this is Pater replying back saying, thank you for the thoughtful discussion. And he wanted to talk specifically about speed versus success sliders, so agency over risk. They're not planning to introduce a speed versus success slider, but the desire for more control over crafting flow and risk is something that they understood from this conversation. So their current plan is to move forward with both of the following. So choosing the number of crafting attempts instead of only one or all. So you'd be able to basically input the number of crafts that you want to try and make. And then batch crafting options tied to specialization paths and higher end crafting facilities. So being able to batch things together a little bit better, and this is going to be tied to higher end crafting as well. So this aligns with their immediate plans that they outlined with the last announcement, but then the goal is to expand player agency in a way that fits into the broader specialization and progression systems rather than adding a direct risk adjustment slider. So agency is always an important thing. You want the player to have agency, to feel like they have ownership over what they're doing and the choices that they're making, and giving them that agency is important to make the game feel worthwhile and they're not just doing the thing that they have to do because that's the thing that they need to do. Then they also talked about sigil and rare component protection. So we hear clearly that losing hard-earned relics and sigils can feel like a punch in the gut, particularly given the effort required to obtain them. Their current thinking is the base return ratio will not guarantee rare components are always safe, but it will drastically improve those chances. But they also mentioned this sufficiently specialized crafter who has invested appropriately into their crafting facility can push the saved ratio higher enough to reliably and potentially even guaranteedly protect rare components. So what's interesting about this is there are, at least currently with the current skill level capped at 40, there are rare items that players can attempt to craft that is still moderate difficulty when they do so. What this effectively means is that for those particular recipes, they will actually, if they specialize enough, then other players will want to go to them, or they will be able to sell things better because they can remove the risk of those failed crafts. And while the other base materials will have to go in, those are easier to attain, they can effectively guarantee that they will get you the craft that you want rather than someone else who might just be rolling on a dice, basically, to determine that. So materials returned from a failed craft will not also contribute to XP. So this allows them to make failure feel fair at the high end without creating an inflated progression path through repeated expensive failures. Basically what they're saying here is after you attempt a craft with items, you're not going to get the XP over and over and over again for just failing bad crafts. So if you take a very hard recipe and you just keep failing and plugging and chugging and you're getting, 4,000 XP every time you fail, then that's not how they want the system to work. Recycling came up frequently, but it's not the primary topic of this particular discussion. They are going to address it separately and in more detail at a later time, but material on returned failed crafts is about balancing risk and fairness. Recycling is intended as an exit strategy for overproduced items in the long-term life cycle management of these items themselves. It's not necessarily limited to supply returning scraps, but they're not ready to go deeper on just that yet. Mainframe, if you hear anything from me in this video, if you could just let us salvage scraps and let blacksmiths turn them into kits to repair things in dungeons instead of using the bugged out construction hammer repair bug, that would be awesome. And I think that would be an incredible feature. Please don't replace the hammer bug until you do that though, because man, oh man, players will revolt if you do that. And then also they mentioned buy orders. So buy orders are something that they're definitely looking into. They want to implement them, and they recognize the role that they can play in improving demand for that. They're eager to move on this, and they will prioritize it as best as they can. So that was specifically the first in-dev feedback that they gave, and this was on crafting and return system. But then earlier this week, they also posted a second post, and this is the upcoming dueling system. This one I'm incredibly excited for. We actually talked to the developers on the channel several months ago now, but one of the things that they teased was 1v1 dueling and how they were working on it. So now this is actually coming to the Arcadia test environment, and it's coming soon. So they don't have an ETA for it on the public test shard, but it is something that they are planning on bringing. And the goal of dueling is so that players can test out PvP related things without having to go through the full drawn out effort to go to PvP, and then when they die the first time, lose all of their gear. It's supposed to be a little bit more forgiving so that players can get that exposure and test out systems and give feedback on them. But by feedback, I mean feedback with their team, not feedback to mainframe. People can give feedback to mainframe regardless, but more so that players can start testing out meta builds, start figuring out what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And that's where 1v1 dueling comes in. Now, obviously, one of the big things that everyone brought up, myself included here, is the ability to have party versus party duels. That is something that they understand they need to add. They said that if they hold back on the 1v1 dueling, it's not going to suddenly make the party versus party dueling come first. In fact, it might actually slow it down more because they need to get the feedback on the 1v1 dueling before they expand the system to the party v party system. I can see their logic with that. They want to get feedback and get things in the hands of the players faster rather than waiting and holding a feature back for an expanded set of that feature. Totally understand that as a player. Totally don't like that. But, you know, that's just how game development works. You have a feature. If the feature works, put it in the player's hands so they can give you feedback before you start spending a lot of extra time and effort on something that the players aren't going to like or the players don't want, or it doesn't work the way that you wanted it to. So what is dueling? It is a way for you to practice your skills. You can engage in role play scenarios so players can duel each other and have those scenarios there. You can also show off your prowess, host tournaments and competition, settle with friendly rivalries, and test new builds. And the important thing with dueling is that no one's going to die. You're not going to have the same just amazing amount of loss associated with PvP. When you die by a player, you lose 40% of your gear just like that. It turns into scrap metal. That really sucks if you're trying to just go out there and test something or have a friendly fight. This makes it a lot easier. So what are the design goals? They want to lower the barrier for trying out PvP in a safe sparring setting. Also, they want to reduce the frustration of getting defeated by letting you practice in a more friendly environment before you go into the more violent spaces. They also want to provide a new social tool and keep things safe where in the Heartlands normally PvP isn't enabled. So how does dueling work? Well, you want to start a duel and you just type /duel player name. It works for anywhere within 20 meters. They do have it space limited. Obviously, there's some issues where if you get entered into a duel and you're a million miles away, how do you exit it? And either way, you can also enter into the interaction menu, which obviously you'd have to be next to the player, and hit request duel. When you send the request, you'll see the duel request being sent. They receive a notification and then thusly starts a 60-second timer. They have that amount of time to respond. If they accept, then there is a 3-second countdown to begin and you fight. If you change your mind at any point in time, you can change it to /cancel duel and your opponent can decline it on the notification. During the countdown, either player can still /cancel duel. So that's how that works. For the rules, there's a no death zone. So when someone would take fatal damage, the duel will automatically end. The losing player is restored to 10 HP instead of dying. And the gear is still going to take the normal amount of combat damage. You don't get XP for any of this, by the way. You still do take the normal, regular combat damage, durability damage for all of your gear when you're using it. You just don't get the same penalty that comes when you die. There is a distance rule, so you can accept within 60 meters. You can request within 20. During the fight, if you go beyond 60 meters, if you run a million miles away from each other, then the fight is canceled. And you can only duel within the same zone. You can't go back and forth between zones on like border crossings and all of that. Other safety restrictions, you can't send or accept a duel if you're in combat with an NPC, if you're combat tagged, if you're currently PvP flagged with, there is one exception that's listed down below. If you're dead or knocked down, you're not going to be able to accept it. Already in another pending or active duel, yep, that's not going to work either. And then if you're too far away. So clan and party exception, clan members and party members can duel each other even if you're PvP flagged. So if you're out in Blay, in Brazilian, if you're out in Carrick, if you're out, at Catalan, wherever you are out in the PvP zone, if you're there with your buddies, you can enter into a duel there. The premise here is you have to be out in the PvP zone and not able to kill them to begin with before you're going to be allowed to kill them in a duel. Kill them. Now, for combat mechanics, it's all normal damage. Standard combat rules apply. You only become hostile to the dueling opponent. Fatal damage you are protected against. The duel ends when combat is concluded at the death of one of the players or the death of one of the players. You can forfeit it during an active duel to surrender. Opponents will win automatically. And then there's also auto cancellation conditions here where if you keep fighting for 10 minutes and the timeout expires, done. Distance violation, either player moves 60 meters away. NPC interference, if an NPC comes in, if a player disconnects or changes zone, or if another player attacks one of the duelists. I do think that in the conversation, this also extends to the potential of other players healing the duelists in the fight. If anyone interferes other than just attacking one of the duelists, I think it also will end. And then there's also environmental hazards. If you take fall damage, fire, burning damage, drowning, poison, or environmental effects, all of these things will also cancel the fight. If you die to the environment during the duel is canceled. So make sure you choose your arena correctly. It also means the duel is canceled and you're not going to automatically revive with 10 HP either. For third-party attacks, if the NPC attacks you, a duel is canceled. Another player attacks you, the duel is canceled, and they deal normal damage. So you don't become impervious to other people attacking you if you're in the PvP zone and a player attacks you. That's just how it works. And then third-party support, so duelists can be healed and receive beneficial effects from other players who are not participating in the duel. We decided to not restrict this because they want players to be able to practice PvP in realistic scenarios, PvP support or healing support. We know this is a potential issue for situations where healing the duelist is not welcome. They will monitor and pay attention to this. So, like I said, this is something that people were already thinking about. And you can see the commands here. You can duel in safe zones. You can duel your clanmates. Nothing happens to your gear other than taking normal durability from the combat. You theoretically could not grief someone by attacking them during a duel. If an external NPC or player attacks either duelist, the duel is immediately canceled. Normal damage is applied. You can only move 60 meters away. You can cancel an active duel. Well, you can't cancel an active duel, but you can forfeit an active duel. You can cancel a duel timer, though, if you wanted to before the duel has started. If you disconnect, then your opponent is going to be declared the winner. You'll be safe when you log back in. Other players can heal you during combat. And here's a bunch of the rules. So in terms of when it's coming, the system is currently internally testing and polishing. It will be on the test shards coming soon. There's been a couple of pinned messages here as well, which is always good to talk about. So one of the comments was request for party versus party has been duly noted. It's out of the scope of this initial version. But once they get the feedback on 1v1s, they'll be able to start applying that to party versus party. The setting to auto decline is also been duly noted. They're not 100% certain if it's already implemented, but they will follow up with the team to make sure that it is. And then also, since it was asked a few times earlier, what message you get when a duel ends for any reason. Here, the message is currently, we're going to update the player disconnect and player left the duel arena ones, the actual player name with the actual player name. So you know who's the person in question. I thought it was funny. Someone mentioned when someone leaves to say player name left and is a coward. I thought that was quite funny. Some flavor text like that might be fun in the future. So first feedback changes are already in. The auto decline in / commands and settings menu has been applied. The name of the player who left the duel arena should also show up in the message. So you can see those already applied to the system there. And then Peter also yesterday went so far as to mention to frame this purely as his own personal perspective and not as a statement of fact, and not dismissing anyone, but speaking only as a player. that they don't experience dueling as PvP at all, full stop. To Peter, PvP is about stakes. It's about risk, politics, reputation, loss, adrenaline, and consequence. That's what makes it meaningful. Dueling feels like something entirely different because it's controlled, it's voluntary, it's low stakes. It's a sandbox for people to practice, test builds, a way to kill time with friends, run clan events, or help newer or PvP curious players with getting a little bit more exposure. It lowers that barrier that people have when they die and they lose all their gear and it's embarrassing for them. And there's that humiliation factor. That's why dueling is a really important feature. So dueling is not intended to replace PvP. A lot of people actually got really spicy in the chat. I'm sure that there's going to be some people in the comments down below that are also spicy about this and how dueling is going to kill the entirety of PvP in Pax Dei. That's not the case. I think many people might be upset because they were running dueling arenas out in Lioness. I can tell you, I don't think those are going to go anywhere anytime soon. Just because you can do a 1v1 duel in a home valley doesn't mean that some players might not also enjoy going out into Lioness to go do the same dueling. It's obviously a little bit higher stakes though, and that's fine. Now, when an additional feature comes in for party versus party, maybe that's when you might have to worry, but nevertheless, you're always going to have the same players that are going out there right now to participate are going out there wholeheartedly knowing that someone could go haywire and kill everyone inside of a giant coliseum that someone's made in Lioness. That's just the fact of the matter. That could happen. So with that being said, those same people that are going out there now aren't going to not go out there in the future. Maybe a couple of them, but the other ones will still continue to go out. Anyways, that's all that we have to talk about for today. I know that was probably a lot of conversation and discussion, but I'm really appreciating how the developers are coming into the Discord, having conversations about features and getting feedback on how to implement them into the actual game. So really, really positive note there. Thanks, Peter, for taking all the time to do that. I know it's not easy to be a developer and then also be managing a Discord with a bunch of people yelling at you about what you should or should not do. People like to should on devs all the time, and you know, it's your game. You need to choose what you believe is best at the end of it. But coming into the Discord and listening to all of us tell you what we think you should or shouldn't do is really appreciated, and I think the player base appreciates it too. So keep doing that. It's really great to see. But with that being said, that's all that we have to talk about today on the PAX Friday review. So if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, hit subscribe so you can get notified whenever we come out with new Pax Dei or Pax Dei related content, and share with any of your friends who are looking to stay up to date on all things Pax Dei and Pax Dei related. But until the next video, I'm Altar, the professional gamer.